Hola, soy Jack Perkins. Sean bienvenidos a Biografía. El pozo y el péndulo, El cuervo, La caída de la casa Usher, todas fueron obras de Edgar Allan Poe. Su solo nombre evoca imágenes de horror y oscuridad. Pero, ¿quién era Poe, en realidad? Se le describe como un hombre atormentado, alcohólico, adicto a las drogas. Pero la verdad de su vida es mucho más compleja. Su genio fue para él una bendición y un castigo.
Por generaciones, las pesadillas de millones de personas han sido alimentadas por los demonios creados por un hombre. Desde los días de mi niñez he sido distinto a los demás. Veo lo que los demás no pueden ver. No podía extraer la pasión de las fuentes que a todos sirven de inspiración. Todo lo que amaba, solo yo lo amaba. En mi niñez, en el amanecer de una vida tormentosa en su mayor parte, saqué de las profundidades del bien y del mal el misterio que me ata y no me deja moverme. El misterio de Edgar Allan Poe. Desde los primeros años de su juventud, Edgar Allan Poe vio en las mujeres seres angelicales. Sus primeras memorias eran de su madre actriz Elisa en encantadoras audiencias.
Cuando andaba por la casa, un murmullo corría a través de los pasillos. ¡Qué criatura más encantadora! Por Dios, qué figura, qué animadas y expresivas eran sus actuaciones. Nunca nada fue la mitad de dulce. Martha Carroll, 1811.
El padre de Edgar Allan Poe, David Poe, hijo, abandonó su familia cuando Edgar solo contaba 1 año de edad. Elisa luchó con valentía para mantener a sus 3 pequeños hijos. Realizó innumerables partes en obras teatrales desde Boston hasta Charleston. Durante una gira en Richmond, Virginia, sucumbió a la temida tuberculosis.
Everyone in Richmond knew of her career, knew of her sickness, and were very, very sympathetic. Even though the society looked down on the profession of actress, she was very well thought of, and people sympathized a great deal with her plight.
En medio de una desesperante pobreza, Elisa agonizaba en una decrépita pensión. El pequeño Edgar, impotente, veía cómo su madre tosía sangre y se consumía en el delirio.
Esta noche, la señora Poe, agonizante a causa de un terrible mal y rodeada de sus hijos, pide su ayuda y lo hace quizá por última vez. Richmond Enquirer, 1811.
Para el momento de su muerte, el 8 de diciembre, Elisa tenía 24 años. Edgar aún no tenía 3 años.
For his entire life, Poe carried with him a small miniature of Elizabeth Poe. And I doubt that Poe had any actual, tangible memory of his mother at all. But he had a kind of bone-deep memory of her presence. And he certainly had a bone-deep memory of the experience of being separated from her, never to see her again.
Huérfanos por deserción y muerte, los 3 niños Poe fueron adoptados por distintas familias en Richmond.
Young Edgar was taken in by the Allen family. Mrs. Allen was very fond of Mrs. Poe, and she and John Allen had no children. So you can almost imagine Mrs. Allen pressing Mr. Allen by saying, "Oh, let's take the dear child in."
Mr. Allen, who was a tough, up-from-under, successful Scots merchant, raised young, unadopted Edgar about as well as a child could be under the circumstances, with good schooling, a good education, fine manners, a young Southern gentleman of his time. And that then an enormous gap existed between this precocious, brilliant, polished, well-educated young poet and this rough-and-ready tobacco merchant who had raised him.
La señora Allen crió al joven Edgar con afecto y le sirvió de guía. Le ayudó a desarrollar la personalidad de un buen joven adulto.
He was a very athletic young man. Sports he was very interested in. Of course, later on in life, he would downplay any sort of a physical activity, saying that a baboon could do it just as well. But when he was a young man, natural leader, an athlete.
A los 15 años, Poe nadó 6 millas contracorriente en el río James, una hazaña que le dio renombre en todo Richmond. Estaba lleno de espíritu, era vigoroso y brillante. Su naturaleza sensible pronto le hizo buscar almas gemelas.
Jane Stannard was a mother of a boyhood friend of his, and she seems to have been his adolescent first love. She died of brain cancer. She died when he was about 15. And he was absolutely broken up. He ended up crying at the grave a lot. This was one of several times he would end up weeping at the grave of a woman he loves and who died at an early age.
Todavía llorando la muerte de Jane Stannard, Poe se enteró que su madre adoptiva había sido atacada por el flagelo de la tuberculosis. Su largo padecimiento profundizó la brecha existente entre él y John Allen.
His own wife was dying of tuberculosis, and while she was dying of tuberculosis, John Allen was having numerous affairs in his own house. And maybe this was accepted behavior for that time period, but poor young Edgar knew of this. It seemed like everybody knew about it. And Edgar believed that women should be treated with respect and courtesy.
Deseoso de proseguir sus aventuras sin que nadie lo interrumpiera, en 1827 Edgar fue enviado a la Universidad de Virginia cuando ésta apenas tenía un año de fundada.
The place was a wild school. They were continually having to call in the police. There was a professor who was murdered there. This was a rough and tumble place.
En las aulas de clase, la desbordante imaginación del joven Poe causaba la admiración de sus compañeros.
He would draw all over the walls and the ceiling of his room. And fellow students would come and he would read to them from his stories and show them his artwork. And according to one reminiscence, it wasn't clear to the students at that time whether Poe was going to be a great writer or a great artist.
Poe pronto se vio en serios aprietos financieros.
What John Allen did was he gave Poe just enough money to get there. Gave him no money for food, no money for clothing, no money for the basic necessities that a young man needed.
Desamparado, Poe trató de hacer dinero por medio del juego. Pronto se encontró con una deuda de $2,000. Pidió ayuda a su acaudalado padre adoptivo, pero Allen, ya dispuesto a deshacerse de él, se rehusó a cubrir sus deudas. El orgullo del joven poeta lo llevó a destruir los muebles de su habitación para hacer fogatas para resguardarse del frío.
He left University of Virginia with debtors pursuing him. And debtors' prisons did exist in those days. And Allen did not rescue him. He ran away and joined the army under an assumed name because he was afraid he'd end up in a cold stone cell somewhere over the debts that John Allen wouldn't cover.
Richmond y los Estados Unidos eran demasiado estrechos. Mi teatro debía ser el mundo. Si usted determina abandonarme, aquí le envío mi despedida. Abandonado, no me queda otra opción que ser el doble de ambicioso. Ya verá usted cómo el mundo escuchará del hijo que usted creyó inútil. Carta a John Allen, 1828.
That was the end of any relationship between him and John Allen. After that, he was on his own. He was young, he was a genius, he was broke, and he was out there on his own.
Poe viajó a Boston, la ciudad natal de sus padres naturales, y se alistó en la armada bajo el nombre de Edgar A. Perry. Allí subió rápidamente al rango más alto para un soldado y luego asistió por corto tiempo a la Academia West Point.
Pero la vida militar no fue más que una fase de lo que sería una vida reservada a un objetivo mucho más precioso.
Soy joven, aún no tengo 20 años. Soy poeta, si se puede llamar poeta a aquel que idolatre la belleza. Daría un mundo por poder hacer realidad la mitad de las ideas que flotan en mi imaginación. Carta a John Neal, 1828.
A los 20 años, había gastado sus escuálidos fondos para publicar 2 libros de poesía. Desafortunadamente, la vida continuó dándole motivos de inspiración para su trabajo. A principios de 1829, Frances Allen, un romance suyo, cayó también víctima de los estragos de la tuberculosis.
Her death affected him terribly. It was the third older woman whom he had loved, it's even safe to say worshipped, who died, and the second one to die of tuberculosis. And of course, the great irony was that this was not the last time it was going to happen in his life.
Huérfano de 2 madres, rechazado por 2 padres, Poe buscó con desesperación un lugar seguro. En 1831 se mudó a Baltimore, a casa de su tía Maria Clem y su pequeña hija Virginia de 8 años. Fue allí donde finalmente encontró el acogedor hogar que se le había negado.
The concept of family was incredibly important to Poe. Half his life was spent searching for that ideal family, which I think he found in his life with Virginia and her mother, Maria Clem.
Poder encontrar apoyo como escritor era poco menos que imposible en aquel tiempo, y ahora se veía en la necesidad de mantener a una nueva familia.
There were no copyright laws to speak of, and if you were desperate and you were starving, and the publishers knew this, they would set the terms. He had a hard time selling The Telltale Heart because publishers thought it was too loud. They wanted more quiet stories. So he was at the mercy of the publishers.
En medio de los aprietos que debía vivir para sobrevivir como escritor, Poe fue llamado al lecho de muerte de John Allen.
When he went into John Allen's room, John Allen took up a cudgel and waved it and threatened from his deathbed the foster son, whom he considered so ungrateful.
John Allen left Poe out of his will. He left a lot of money to illegitimate children, but absolutely nothing to Poe.
Con la determinación de continuar sus ideales literarios, Poe pasaría el resto de su vida luchando contra la pobreza, perdiendo la batalla muchas veces. En 1835 dejó temporalmente el hogar de los Clemens para encargarse del puesto de editor en la recientemente creada Southern Literary Messenger.
He was a marvelous success as an editor as well as a writer. Unfortunately, he was headstrong, he was sometimes arrogant, and almost always ended up in conflict with his bosses.
When he criticized someone, he was ruthless. He was brutal. He had the nickname of the Tomahawk Man, or the Comanche of literature, because of his brutal, slashing reviews.
Este libro es una imposición pública. Debe haber sido impreso entre los avisos de los cuáqueros en una esquina abandonada del diario. Book Review, 1836.
He was always one to get into literary skirmishes. He had started that pattern early by accusing Henry Wadsworth Longfellow of being a plagiarist. That made almost everybody in America mad at him. He was a very combative personality, and I've always felt that Poe's own battles in the literary world were rooted in that early antagonistic relationship with John Allen and his need to prove himself and his need to exact some kind of revenge.
Poco después de regresar a Richmond, Poe experimentó una crisis devastadora. Maria Clem le escribió acerca de sus planes de enviar a su prima Virginia, ya de 12 años, a vivir con otros parientes.
At this point, Poe had his first terrible drinking episode. He crashed into a horrid depression. He went on a drinking binge, damn near lost his job, and he realized he could not lose Virginia. he was in love with her.
He wrote a hysterical letter to Muddy, pleading with her not to let her do this, pleading with Virginia not to do this. It's a very emotional letter, almost paranoid in its intensity.
Me enceguecen las lágrimas cuando escribo esta carta. Mi último y mi único deseo en esta vida se ha vuelto pedazos. No quiero dejar ir y no dejaré ir a mi amor. Sabes que amo a Virginia con pasión y devoción. Carta a Maria Clem, 1835.
En esa carta, Poe añadió una postdata a Virginia, en la que le asignaba toda una cantidad de cualidades femeninas.
Mi amor, mi más dulce amor, mi pequeña, piénsalo bien antes de romper el corazón de tu primo Eddie.
To what extent he was troubled by the fact that he married his first cousin, I don't know. But it certainly is curious that in circumstances like this, he apparently thought of her as cousin and sister and wifey all at once.
Al mes siguiente, Poe y Virginia contrajeron matrimonio. Él tenía 26 años y ella aún no tenía 13. Para evitar el escándalo, el documento del matrimonio fue falsificado, se le atribuyó 21 años. Aun cuando los detalles íntimos de la relación siguen siendo un misterio, existe evidencia de que fue una pareja fiel y amante.
When you were with the Poe family, you couldn't see a happier couple. They were always playing games. There's one story when Poe was living in New York where they were playing hop frog across each other's backs, and Poe split his pants because he jumped too high and he squatted too fast. Poe was so embarrassed that his face got red, and Virginia couldn't stop giggling because Eddie had split his britches. Many people can't imagine Poe playing in the garden, playing with animals, teaching Virginia how to play the flute, teaching her algebra. He was a very devoted, very loving, and caring husband.
Pero la vida privada de Poe era muy distinta de su vida pública. Su vida como escritor y crítico constituye una serie interminable de ácidas querellas y humillaciones financieras.
Poe's life was a constant struggle to make ends meet. Many times his mother-in-law begged for him. She would go out and try to solicit either work or loans of money for the family.
Poe fue a veces su propio peor enemigo. Cuando se encontraba camino al éxito, él mismo saboteaba sus propios esfuerzos. En 1842 arregló una reunión con el presidente de Estados Unidos, John Tyler, para solicitar un en el gobierno.
He showed up for the appointment quite intoxicated. He was wearing his cloak inside out. He was disheveled. And fortunately for Poe, the president's son, Robert Tyler, intercepted him first and said, "Why don't you come back in a few days?" When Poe showed up for the second meeting, he was quite sober and conducted himself very well at first. But then, through some bizarre quirk, he decided to use the opportunity of this meeting not just to secure the president's help in getting a position in the Customs House, but to solicit magazine subscriptions from him.
He was driven to sink his own ship, as if that early experience of being abandoned himself created a kind of chronic pattern of needing to do himself in some strange, perverse way.
Poe era perseverante y utilizaba su imaginación como medio de defensa contra un mundo que lo trataba sin piedad. En el pacífico contexto de su hogar feliz, se sirvió de pluma y papel para crear obras que revelaban morbosos temores e indecibles añoranzas.
Only Edgar Allan Poe, who knew intimately the tortures of madness, could create such ever-increasing suspense.
Más allá del sensacionalismo, las descripciones que Hollywood hace de Poe contienen una gran verdad. Los temas de sus cuentos tenían firmes raíces en la horrenda realidad de su vida. Rodeado por la muerte prematura de sus seres más queridos, añoraba una conexión con la vida de ultratumba.
Los límites que dividen a la vida de la muerte son, en el mejor de los casos, sombríos y vagos. ¿Quién puede decir dónde comienza la una y dónde termina la otra? El entierro prematuro, 1844.
Poe is a seeker of forbidden knowledge. Underlying all of these kinds of forbidden knowledge is the one knowledge that is forbidden to everyone, to die and to be able to come back with word about what dying is like, what exists, if anything does, on the other side of death.
Es evidente que estamos encaminados hacia un conocimiento emocionante, un secreto que nunca será revelado y cuyo fin es la destrucción. Manuscrito encontrado en una botella en 1833.
If the mind and if life is all this richness built up, if it is all the beauty of nature, all these things comprehended in a memory, that memory is going to go out like a candle. And that's the kind of knowing quality in all those stories about death. Death can't be this way. It can't be annihilation. It can't be oblivion.
Poe se aferró al misterio de la muerte y a los caprichos de la vida.
He lived in a time when it was terribly, terribly difficult to make any kind of living with the printed word. He lived with the illness and death and misfortune of himself, his relatives, friends, you name it. There was almost no catastrophe that didn't touch his life at some point.
Poe, al igual que sus personajes, siempre estuvo sumido en una lucha entre racionalidad e irracionalidad, orden y caos.
Logic was very important to Poe. He created the detective story because of his need for order and logic in his life. Some people have said he may have created the detective story in order that he not go mad.
En 1841, Poe publicó Los asesinatos de la calle Morgue, la primera novela detectivesca, género que alcanzaría su máxima expresión con Sherlock Holmes. Un amigo francés, Auguste Dupin, usa el razonamiento analítico para investigar una serie de horribles asesinatos con objetos cortantes. La solución final desafía toda lógica. Los asesinatos son cometidos por un orangután esgrimiendo una hoja de afeitar. En El corazón delator, el narrador clama su cordura en voz alta para luego contar cómo asesinó y descuartizó a un anciano.
Muy nervioso, horriblemente. Más de lo que hubiera estado o esté. Pero ¿por qué habrían de decir que estoy loco? Presten atención y observen cuán saludablemente, cuán tranquilamente puedo contarles todo. El corazón delator, 1843.
Como muchos otros personajes de Poe, la culpa obligó a este narrador a confesar su crimen.
Poe's thinking was strikingly modern, almost 20th century, in the way he expressed psychological introspection. In many of his stories, a tortured narrator would delve into deep wells of guilt. And through exploring that guilt, I think Poe approached something very close to modern psychoanalysis.
Quizá ninguna otra historia llegó tan adentro al corazón de Poe como La máscara de la muerte roja.
Ninguna pestilencia había sido tan fatal o tan horrenda. La sangre era su avatar y su sello, sangre roja de horror. La máscara de la muerte roja, 1842.
Consumption, which now is known as tuberculosis, was responsible for the death of so many people that Poe loved. And that illness involved the coughing up of a great amount of blood. And I think that identification was impressed on Poe's brain at a very young age. And to him, consumption was, I think, the Red Death.
Fue entonces cuando se admitió la presencia de la muerte roja. Había venido como un ladrón en la noche, y uno a uno fueron cayendo los jaraneros en su regocijo tumultuoso bañado de sangre. y todos morían en la desesperante postura impuesta por la muerte. En la oscuridad, la descomposición y la muerte roja dominaban todo.
Cuando Poe escribió La Máscara de la Muerte Roja, ya había perdido a su madre, a su madrastra y a su hermano. Todos ellos habían muerto de tuberculosis. Solo en la peor de sus pesadillas habría imaginado que la enfermedad atacaría otra vez. Con los años, el acercamiento entre Poe y su amada Virginia se hizo cada vez mayor. Su compañía le daba el refugio que necesitaba para escapar de las tormentas de su vida literaria.
Poe and Virginia interacted together, sitting at the piano, playing, laughing. Virginia would go outside of the cottage and pick flowers, skip rope. They would take walks together in the garden and talking and singing and come back in and fix dinner together, always together.
Poe se deleitaba con su voz de soprano y con frecuencia le pedía que cantara en casa. Una noche fatídica de 1842, él y María Clem la oían cantar.
As she was singing, there was a slight cough, and then there was a drop of blood that appeared on her lips. And Poe realized that, like his mother, like his stepmother, like his brother Henry, that Virginia had consumption, tuberculosis. He knew what that meant. That was a death sentence.
It was the beginning of a very long and quite horrible struggle, and probably only her youthful energy kept her alive as long as she managed to fight on, which was about 5 years. And those were 5 years of hell for Edgar Allan Poe.
Poe tried very hard to make his wife comfortable. He would have to physically carry Virginia sometimes from the bed to the table when she wanted to go to the table to eat, and sometimes he would bring her food.
En medio de su infierno privado, Poe alcanzó su gran fama y reconocimiento público. En 1845 su poema El Cuervo fue publicado por el New York Evening Mirror.
When The Raven was published, it was an overnight sensation, and his nickname became The Raven. It was the talk of the town. It was sensational. It was scary. It was horrifying. People were having nightmares. They were having dreams of a raven coming through their windows at night. Children would follow him on the street, flapping their arms like the raven. And of course, he would just play along with it. He would say nevermore, and they would run away, and then they would come back, and they would be taking sticks and hitting his heels, and he would turn around and say nevermore, and they would run away again. So he loved it. He loved the fame that it brought to him, but it didn't bring him any fortune. He earned $14 for The Raven.
He was very poor. He only had one coat for many years, and he didn't have a fresh shirt to wear under it, so he wore the coat buttoned to the collar. His dress may have seemed rather austere, but there was nothing austere about him. He was raised as a Southern gentleman, and that meant he was raised to be social. He was raised to be convivial. He was raised to be charming, to be entertaining, to be polite. And he was indeed all of those things.
El público se agolpaba para ver al misterioso Poe haciendo dramáticas declamaciones del Cuervo.
Su declamación era una rapsodia de la más intensa brillantez. Sus ojos relampagueaban como los de un verdadero cuervo, y esto mantenía al público en una especie de trance. Monsell Field, 1845.
El Cuervo narra la historia de un poeta que añora su amor perdido, un trágico papel que el mismo Poe debería interpretar pronto.
Sí, lo recuerdo con claridad. Era un sombrío diciembre y cada una de las antorchas dibujaba su fantasma en el piso. Con ansiedad esperaba el amanecer. En vano traté de hallar alivio para mi pena, pena por la pérdida de Eleonora, por la rara y radiante doncella que los ángeles llamaron Eleonora. De ahora en adelante, sin nombre.
Poe is projecting ahead to his own loss of Virginia, and the circumstance in the poem is of a writer who is trying to forget desperate to repress or deny or somehow let go of the terrible weight of this loss. And yet he asks that question at the end, when will I see my beloved Lenore? Quoth the raven, nevermore.
Profeta, le dije, ser del mal. Profeta aún si sois pájaro del mal, por el cielo que se dobla sobre nosotros, por ese Dios que ambos adoramos, di a esta alma agobiada si dentro de un tiempo, cercano o distante, podrá llevar de la mano una santa doncella que los ángeles han llamado Eleonora. Llevar de la mano a una radiante y rara doncella que los ángeles han llamado Eleonora. Y el cuervo replicó, nunca más.
That poem is a kind of rehearsal for his own bereavement. The circumstances are too immediate. As he writes that poem in another room of the house, his own wife is dying.
Hace 6 años a una esposa a quien amé como ningún esposo ha amado sobre esta tierra, al cantar se le rompió un vaso sanguíneo. De ella para siempre me despedí y sufrí todas las agonías de su muerte. Se recuperó brevemente y de nuevo guardé esperanzas. Al final de ese año el vaso se le rompió de nuevo. Pasé incesantemente por la misma situación una y otra vez y otra y otra. Cada vez sentí todas las agonías de su muerte. Enloquecí y tuve períodos de horrible cordura. Durante esos períodos bebí. Solo Dios sabe con qué frecuencia y cuánto. Carta a George Evelyn, 1848.
En 1846, Poe llevó a su agonizante esposa a una apacible cabaña en Fordham, Nueva York, donde la pareja, atacada por la pobreza, debió sufrir los rigores de un helado invierno.
La temperatura era muy baja y la chica sufría los temidos fríos que acompañan a la fiebre de la consunción. Estaba tendida sobre un colchón de paja, cubierta con el abrigo de su esposo y con un gran gato esculpido en concha de tortuga colocado sobre su seno para darle calor. Mary Grove, 1846.
One of the things that almost sent Poe over the edge during those years was that as he watched Virginia get better, get worse, get better, get worse, very often he literally, despite working 16 hours a day, could not raise enough money to keep her well fed, to keep her warm, to keep a fire going, to buy her medicine, even to keep a roof over her head. And he went through terrible spasms of helpless rage and guilt. And finally, of course, the ultimate defeat, he could not keep her from dying.
Poe nunca se recuperaría de la muerte de Virginia. Entró en una especie de delirio, salía a vagar por las calles hasta llegar hasta su tumba a cualquier hora, donde se acostaba a llorar hasta caer dormido. Años más tarde, durante el último año de su vida, evocaría la fuerza misma para inmortalizar a su niña esposa en el poema Annabel Lee.
Era yo un niño. Era ella una niña. En este reino cercano al mar. Pero nos amamos con un amor que era más que amor. Yo y mi Annabel Lee. Un amor que los serafines codiciaron de ella y de mí. Y fue por eso que hace mucho, en este reino cercano al mar, el viento sopló desde una nube y enfrió a mi hermosa Annabel Lee. Sí, es esa la razón. Como todos los hombres saben, en este reino cercano al mar, que el viento vino de las nubes al caer la noche, enfrió y mató a mi hermosa Annabel Lee. La luna no brilla y las estrellas nunca salen sin que yo sienta los ojos de la hermosa Annabel Lee. Y así, en la marea de la noche, heme aquí moribundo, al lado de mi amada, en su sepulcro cercano al mar, en su tumba desde donde se oye el murmullo del mar. Los cielos se tiñeron de ceniza y sobriedad, y las hojas se tornaron frágiles y secas. Las hojas se volvieron secas. Era noche en aquel solitario octubre del año que recuerdo con más amargura. Evelyn, 1848.
El cumpleaños 40 y último de Poe fue una furiosa lucha por recuperar los ideales de su juventud.
He de pertenecer a la literatura por lo menos mi vida entera. No dejaré jamás las esperanzas que me llevan a buscar todo el oro de California. Carta a F.W. Thomas, 1849.
Pero sus metas personales habían sido arrasadas por una vida personal atormentada. Virginia se había ido. Ahora era evidente que no podría vivir sin una compañera.
Suddenly, Poe's life becomes a kind of chaotic chase in which he is moving from place to place, romancing several women at once, and sometimes almost literally writing them the same letters, using the same phrases to try to court them. I don't think he was being insincere. I think it's a mark of how fundamentally confused he was in the way he was trying to arrange his own life.
Poe said that women have been angels of mercy to me, tenderly leading me from the verge of ruin while men stood aloof and mocked. And I think he meant that very sincerely.
Se enamoró perdidamente de Helen Whitman, una poetisa y figura social prominente. La persiguió incansablemente.
Cuando miraban fijos tus ojos en los míos, vi que ellos eran Helen, mi Helen, la Helen de 1000 sueños. Si murieras, tomaría tu mano en mi mano y con dicha bajaría contigo a la noche de las tumbas. Carta a Helen Whitman, 1848.
Poe is drawn to that woman in part out of a desire to share the experience of death. Poe imagines that dying with a beautiful woman or being with the dead beloved other will in some way ease his passage out of the world.
Poe se declaró a Whitman en un cementerio y tras un rechazo inicial ella aceptó. Todo parecía indicar que estaba salvado, pero su creciente reputación de bebedor acabó con sus esperanzas.
Sarah Helen Whitman's mother actually drew up a document that she wanted Poe to sign saying that Poe had no claim on any of Sarah's estate, and this was intolerable to Poe. This was an insult, and he took it as an insult. So this was really the thing that broke off the engagement. Poe didn't take it. I mean, he gave it right back to her, said no, and that was it.
Incluso antes de terminar con Helen, escribía cartas de amor a Annie Richmond de Massachusetts, una mujer casada.
He even made the comment in one of his letters to Maria Clem that there's no good news she can tell him except perhaps that Mr. Richmond has died.
Poe perdió todo control sobre su vida. Las lecturas que una vez habían sido descollantes se habían convertido ahora en humillantes decepciones.
The drinking became much worse during that period. Towards the end, he had bouts of insanity during which he thought that people were after him to assassinate him. At one point, he had a friend of his shave off his mustache so he wouldn't be recognized.
Su interminable búsqueda de una novia lo llevó a una figura de su adolescencia.
Poe renewed his romance, rekindled this romance with the widow Shelton, a lady that he'd been engaged to years before when he was 17.
A finales de septiembre de 1849, se comprometieron Poe y Elmira Shelton. Ansioso de hacer llegar las buenas noticias a Maria Clem, se rumbó hacia Nueva York.
The people who saw him last in the city of Richmond, the last thing they remember is commenting on how sick he looked, how pale, how ashen gray his face was.
Poe estaba entrando en su pesadilla final. Desapareció unos cuantos días, Su paradero era un misterio. Luego, el 3 de octubre fue encontrado semiconsciente en una calle de Baltimore.
They found him in a delirious condition. He wasn't even wearing his own clothing. He was wearing someone else's clothing that didn't fit him, that was soiled. We really don't know what happened to Poe. One theory is that he was a victim of a political kidnapping. It was election day in Baltimore, and frequently thugs were hired by the politicians, and they would go out and kidnap people, and they would give you drugged liquor and use you as a repeat voter.
Poe fue llevado a una taberna cercana.
And the tavern owner recognized him and sent a message to somebody that he knew was acquainted with him and said, I have a gentleman here, rather the worse for wear, which was an understatement. And Poe was then rushed in a carriage to Washington College Hospital.
He was delirious. They said he was talking to phantasms on the wall, in a feverish delirium. And then, of course, early Sunday morning, October the 7th, about 5 o'clock in the morning, he regained consciousness. And he said, God help my poor soul. And then he died.
One of the reasons why Poe speaks to us so clearly is that he constructs a world of uncertainty, a world that's precarious, a world in which one yearns for an afterlife, yearns for some image of heaven to believe in, but is confronted by violence and cruelty. Poe didn't live into the second half of the 19th century, and he couldn't have imagined that have unfolded in the 20th century. But I think there is something in Poe's fiction that looks beyond his own time and guesses what we will face in ours.
Gracias al cielo, la crisis y el peligro han terminado ya, y la fiebre llamada vida ha sido al fin conquistada. Los quejidos y las toses, los ronquidos y los suspiros han sido aplacados. Las palpitaciones, las náuseas y el dolor implacable han cesado con la fiebre que hacía enloquecer el cerebro, con la fiebre llamada vida que quemaba en el cerebro.
Apenas semanas antes de morir, en Richmond, la ciudad que le vio vivir, Poe declaró que perdía sus fuerzas y su actuación no fue buena. Pero entre la audiencia ese día estaba un editor de un diario que pudo ver mucho más que un genio moribundo. Vio la gloria de una gran imaginación creadora. Escribió, ningún otro escritor de los Estados Unidos será mejor recordado como él. Si Poe hubiera poseído más talento que genio, habría sido un hombre muy rico. Pero lo que sí es cierto es que Poe merece su lugar entre los inmortales de la literatura. Para Biografía, soy Jack Perkins. Hasta la próxima.